Hello, my name is David, but you can call me Skiff, and welcome back to another episode of Notflix, the show about other shows. Today we are discussing Netflix's original series, Season 1, Episode 12, Why Things Go Bad. If you haven't seen the episode yet, I'm gonna say go ahead and do that first because I'm warning you now there will be spoilers. But if you have watched the episode, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. So, finale episode, where we left Patti off in our last episode. She was getting tranked by a mysterious person. So at the beginning of this episode, we are revealed to whom Patti was kidnapped by. That is a strange phrase, but it is what it is, right? And it turns out to be Stella Rose and Roxy, which was a very interesting turn of events because that wasn't what we were led to believe. So I applaud the writers and the creators for throwing us off and leading us in a direction that we weren't expecting, and allowing us a little bit of mystery up until this point and intrigue as well. So the reasoning behind the kidnapping of Patti by Stella Rose and Roxy is revealed to us very quickly. Stella Rose, always out for revenge against Bob, has decided that the best way to get revenge against Bob is to take away his plan B, which inevitably would be Patti, and also take away his plan A, which is now Roxy. So she sort of wants to destroy his spirit and destroy everything that he has come to love and take everything that he loves, or what she thinks he loves, away from him, which is pageants, right? So obviously, if she pushes if she pushes Roxy into his arms and then snatches that away, and then he can't find Patti because she's mysteriously missing now, of course he is going to be distraught. Right? Well, learning this knowledge, Patti then decides that she has to find a way out, and she of course does. And the interesting thing for me, I think, around this whole kidnapping thing is that while she's running away and then eventually gets tracked down by Roxy again and gets handcuffed to the Wiener taco truck, she does eventually come to the realization that because of the way she has been treated by society and by her peers, that this has turned her into the person, or the mirror image, if you will, of the person that people wanted her to be, and not necessarily who she is. Now, based on the knowledge of what occurs in the rest of this episode, the murder of Cristian and the murder of, well, apparent murder of Stella Rose, Patti isn't a very good person and is actually the villain of this story, as dubbed by Cristian in this episode, which is very interesting to me, to have your villain, or I guess to be your protagonist, to also then eventually turn into your antagonist in the story, and was a very interesting turn of events overall. At least for me it was. I mean, there have been so many different plot points and so many different genre turns throughout this entire season that to then have this giant shift in the last episode to turn it into sort of a very dark comedy and less of a dramedy was a very interesting turn of events, I think. So throughout this entire episode, it's basically going back and forth between Patti trying to get away from Stella Rose and being kidnapped and trying to get back to warn Bob about what's going to happen with Roxy, and her being kidnapped. So not much is happening, save for the fact when Stella Rose admits all of this, admits her plan to Bob, and then Bob doesn't care because he thinks that he's gotten what he wanted, which we will also get to in a second. She then decides that she needs to kill Patti as the ultimate revenge And we then learn that Stella Rose spent a year in what she calls, I guess, a nut house, which, what that is, I don't know. I can only imagine. But it is, again, I think a very dramatic turn of phrase, and it is sort of to just prove a point. But where that has led us to her thinking, I mean, she's clearly off her rocker, right? Because she thinks that the way to get back at this man that she loves, who doesn't return her love, and doesn't care about the things that she thought he cared about, is to kill somebody and then have that person write a suicide note blaming that person to sort of destroy him and destroy his self-worth and everything that he's thought he's become. I mean, nobody in this show, at the end of the day, is that great of a person. All these people suck, right? None of them are great people, and that's sort of like the conclusion that I've come to throughout this entire season. There's very few people in this world of Insatiable that they've given us that are good people. Bob seems to be a fairly good person, generally misguided, but I guess you could say that he is a good person. I mean, while we're talking about Bob, we might as well talk about what's going on in his world at the moment. We're left with the idea in the last episode that he's going to have this throuple with Christopher Gorham and Alyssa Milano, and they sort of are having this like heated sexual moment of the three of them, which does get interrupted by Brick and Nani while they're trying to find Patti, because they of course assume that she's stolen the truck and she's distraught and she's eating everything in it, so they need to find her. I guess it makes sense for the storyline and the plot lines that we've been given up until this point and the character that Patti has been up until this point, but not great. Either way, they then come to terms with the idea that maybe, well, at least Alyssa Milano and Bob have this sort of discussion in a hotel room before Christopher Gorham shows up, where they talk about the idea of a throuple and like what it would entail and if it could work and how it would work. And they have this sexual rendezvous threesome, right? Ménage à trois, if you will. And things seem to be good. And Christopher Gorham seems to be on board, and Alyssa Milano is definitely on board. And they even say to each other that it's everything that I never thought that I needed. And who knows? I mean, who's to say that a throuple couldn't work in this day and age, in this scenario where one couple is married and then there's just sort of a third person attached to them as well. As long as there's clear rules and everything is being discussed and people are being honest with each other and the trust is there, of course a throuple can work. In this particular situation, obviously, as the show progresses and we find out that Christopher Gorham, the reasoning behind him leaving the hotel room so early was he was called, or summoned if you will, by Bob's father and given sort of an ultimatum of either dump Bob and get to become mayor of the town, or continue to be with Bob and I'm not supporting you for your bid to become mayor. Which he chooses Bob. Bob is, I guess, left with his own ultimatum. I mean, he's left between a rock and a hard place where he then has to decide, because he is forced to decide, between Alyssa Milano, his wife, and Christopher Gorham, the man of his dreams. And when push comes to shove, he can't decide, because Christopher Gorham told him that, you know, I did that because you wanted to do it, not because I wanted to do it. And Alyssa Milano is basically telling him the same thing. Like, I did it because you wanted me to do it, and I love you, and I don't want to lose you, but this isn't going to work for me in this scenario. So when push comes to shove, Bob decides that the best thing for him is to kill himself. And of course, he is saved by the bell, literally, again by Patti. This time with bad news, not with good news, with the news that she has killed Cristian and has bludgeoned him to death with a car iron. Now, of course, there's no way for her to claim self-defense at that point, I don't think. I mean, perhaps, I don't know the law when it comes to those things, but I don't know that, I think it still would be considered murder in the second degree. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments section down below, but I do think it's still considered murder in the second. And they try and push the car that Cristian was driving into the lake with Patti's clothes. Why? I don't know. Why they would try and hide the evidence of a murder of a person inside of a car while also keeping key evidence that would link Patti to the murder in the car. I mean, the thought process behind that, I think, is a little misguided, I guess you could say. And I mean, I guess since Bob is the one orchestrating all of this, per se, his thought process is already misguided. And he's got a lot on his mind. He almost just tried to kill himself. And this sort of leads us with him screaming, "Could anything else today go wrong?" To which Patti admits, "Well, I sort of kind of killed Stella Rose." Blackout. Now, we already know that at this point that Insatiable has been renewed for season 2. So that's great. Maybe some of our questions will be answered in the first episode of season 2. Those questions being, 1. Magnolia saw Patti when she got out of the trunk from this deep sleep of having been drugged, and she saw Cristian. She has no idea whether or not Patti and Cristian were in on it together, and maybe Patti had a change of heart and just decided to let her go. So Magnolia has some of the details as to what is going on. So what's going on with that? Where is Patti's mom? She's still not around. Is this throuple going to actually happen? Is Christopher Gorham gonna come around to the idea, and is Alyssa Milano gonna come around to the idea? Or is Bob going to sort of branch out on his own and decide to live his life as a single man now? Is Stella Rose actually dead? We never saw a body. And what happened to Roxy? Roxy in all of this was in cahoots with Stella Rose, so you'd think she would then want to find her as well. So what's gonna go on with that? I mean, this tonal shift has sort of left us with the thought and the idea that, as I said before, Patti is the villain of her own story. And where can that then take us in the next season? Is Donald's dad gonna press charges for her stealing the damn truck? And is there a dead body in that truck? There's a lot of questions that need to be answered, I think, in the next season. What's gonna happen to Patti? I think that being the major question. She just killed 2 people. So many questions, so much time we're gonna have to wait. But I guess we'll see you in season 2. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Notflix. If you enjoyed yourself here, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification so you can get notified every single time I upload a new video. If you want to keep up with me on a more regular basis, you can find me across all social media platforms that you can call me Skiff. If you want to be a friend, tell a friend. We'll see you next season. Bye-bye.